Hi, I'm Anne.
And I'm Paul, and welcome to Out of Place, where we speak to the ones who are challenging the status quo, leading out of curiosity, doing things a little bit differently, and above all, have felt out of place along the way.
We've got real stories, honest lessons, a few laughs, and maybe some tears along the way about building businesses and lives from those who have been there, those who are there, and some of them who are just starting out.
You are exactly where you need to be. Let's get into it. So, today, we've touched upon a bit in previous episodes the location independent lifestyle, which is how we wanted to frame it because we didn't seem like we wanted to jump on the digital nomad bandwagon. But that journey for us started way before we ever even met. So, for you, Anne, thinking back, when was that first seed planted?
Oh, this was a long time ago. So, our journey was in 2024 when we embarked on it. But for me, this started a good 12 years ago. Kind of when I turned 30 that I started to question, where is my life going? And is it the life that I choose? And at the time, I was married. I had two dogs. We had a beautiful home. And I'd kind of ticked the boxes, right? Like lifestyle wise, and in my life, I'd done the right things. I finished school. I went to university, got a degree, got the job, the person, the dogs, the house, all that kind of stuff. And my career was blossoming, but I just didn't feel as if that was the life that I wanted to live. And so I started to think about, well, what do I really want? And I actually wanted to work and live overseas. That was kind of the first idea. It's something that I've always dreamed of. And I spoke to my partner at the time, saying, hey, would this be an opportunity for us? Could we make this happen? And his response was, no, I kind of like what we have here. Like, look what we've built. And for me, that just wasn't the right response, unfortunately. And so I had to start taking risks and I had to start making choices for myself. And the first one was to leave that relationship, which was, a very secure and safe relationship and an amazing person as well. But it just didn't feel right. And it didn't feel as though that was where directionally I wanted to be in life as well. So I had to make a really difficult decision and hard choice then. And then after that, I was working for a company, a construction tech company, and they were growing, like scaling globally. And I saw this opportunity that was happening for other people in the organization of being seconded somewhere else. And so I simply asked the question. I was new to this company, had a new CMO at the time, or chief marketing officer, and I just had the audacity to ask the question of, hey, would this be an opportunity for me? Can we shape something? Can we make this happen? And instead of saying no, he said, okay, well, let's have a look at your KPIs. Let's look at where you're going. And then if you can meet some of those early on, then we can continue this conversation.
I love how the opportunity you wanted to create was measured by metrics again, not by wanting to support someone in their life, but by metrics. That's really interesting. And at that point in your life, was your way of thinking more aligned with the metrics and you really understood that? Or were you in that place already where you were like, well, if something doesn't align with me, I'm going to leave it and follow what I want to do?
I was still in that metric side of life, but I knew that by speaking up and asking for what I wanted was going to head me in the right direction. So I was kind of straddling that whole heart and head piece, right? Of my heart says I want to go overseas and I want to do something and I want to live differently. My head was going logistically, and also to ensure that it happens, you have to be able to meet the metrics. And so I was straddling both of those. But also, at that time, I had caught up with a friend and we had dinner with this agency. I was in Sydney at the time visiting. And this one conversation that I had with this random person, actually not random because he was invited to this dinner, kind of changed my way of thinking.
How did it change your way of thinking? How did this one person at dinner help shape your perspective that was obviously at that time it was curious and it was starting to grow?
Yeah, so we were talking about what life looks like and where it's heading. And we didn't go into what do you do, the typical, what's your job? Tell me about that. He started telling me about this life that he was creating with his partner. And he introduced me to the concept of digital nomad, actually, at the time. He was saying, my partner and I were actually about 6 months away from leaving our jobs and really going hard on this side hustle that we have and moving to Asia, and we're working towards that. But it's taken a while for us to reshape our mindset and think beyond what we have here and the safety of what we have here. And so at the end of that dinner, he said to me, if you're wanting to head in this direction, one thing I would recommend for you to do is read The 4 Hour Work Week
Oh
by
yeah.
Tim Ferriss.
I think a lot of people have read that one who've explored the digital nomad or wanted to explore it.
Yeah, so he recommended that, which I bought pretty much the next day and read. And then he posed 2 questions. And the first one was, what's stopping you? And that's such an interesting question for me because at the time, what was stopping me was me. I realized when I started to answer that question, it was just purely me standing in my own way, not anything else, not the variables around me. There were things that I could move and change and shape to make things happen, but I wasn't doing it because I was scared.
That's a really interesting thing to say. Was it the was it your internal beliefs that were making you scared, or was it instilled beliefs that maybe had been shared with you from society and through what's accepted?
Oh, totally the instilled societal beliefs, right? There's a mix of the two of them. The first one is definitely the societal belief. You need to have these things and you need to be doing this to be safe and secure or to be successful, the measures of success. Um, it was also the fear that was instilled in me from my childhood. So my parents were refugees from Vietnam. They were boat people. And for them, losing safety, losing security became such an important thing for them to change for us as their children and ensure that we didn't have and that we had safety and security. There was a lot of fear, right? So they instilled a lot of fear around you have to have these things in place because if you don't, what happens? If you don't do that, what happens? If you don't do that, what happens? So I lived my life in a place of just constantly fearing something would go wrong.
Yeah. So you had the seed planted 10 years ago, and 10 years sounds like a long time, but I think when you're going through a lot of transitions, 10 years isn't actually that long. And you'd had this seed planted, you'd left a relationship, you'd explored the opportunity to go and work and live in a different country. And you had all these other things going on. The fear that we all have, the risks we got to take, like even just the fear of leaving a relationship which is very secure, which could really set you up for the rest of your life and you'd be happy and content and so on.
Hmm.
But maybe you're still missing that internal desire. And it sounds like that's what you were exploring. And for that to take shape, that led, 10 years since the seed was planted to getting on that first plane back in May 2024. Like so much has happened there.
Yeah, because the changes I had to make to get to the point where I felt comfortable, where I felt ready enough to do it and embark on it, actually took a long time. It took a lot of transitions, a lot of those changes in that decade. So, the other question that he posed to me is what could be better? And Those two questions played on my mind a lot, especially around decision making that I made from that point onwards. Because if I'm settling for just what is and what is safe or comfortable, then what am I missing out on?
So at this point, do you think that your decisions and the thoughts you were putting into how you were shaping your life were now at a point where they were internal to you? They're about what you want to build, no longer about the career, no longer about the fancy things, the things that we can easily tick off on a checklist. It was about these unmeasurable things that were starting to come through.
It started to become about the unmeasurable things, but it still took a long time to get to a point where they stopped mattering and I stopped caring about them. Because over that course of that 10 years, I continued to progress in my career. I got to the highest point in marketing in a company, which is chief marketing officer. I ticked those boxes that may not have been the ones that I was actively choosing to pursue, but subconsciously I was pursuing. I was still achieving those things
Hmm.
and maybe performing in a way as well. But along the way, each of those decisions was continuing to bring me closer to what I wanted and what I desired, and not about what other people desired. And part of that is understanding that when you talk about becoming a digital nomad or location independent, there are people around you who will project their own fears and their own insecurities upon you when you say that.
There's a lot of people around you that don't understand it. And it's not that they need to understand it, but then it can come out as those insecurities, those fears, because we all are all fearful of doing something different. We're all fearful of challenging the status quo because for, we've both learned you become out of place when you do it. Um, so it's very natural, and that must have been a hard thing for you to carry, having those external projections filtering in because we're human. We can say other people's opinions don't matter, but if we're real, we still we're still gonna absorb it slightly and learn what to do with it. So how was that for you? How did those external things shape your approach in getting started with it?
Yeah. So the external forces and voices, they amplify the fears, right? They amplify the anxieties and the things that you're trying to break away from. So for me, it was continuing to accept and honor what I wanted and what was calling me instead of allowing those external voices to then amplify that fear or that trigger or that wound that I still had and I was still processing. So it's just taking that incremental steps towards continuing to believe and trust in the decisions you're making and trusting that they're the right ones for you and not for other people. And then listening to what people have to say, but not necessarily taking it on board because the way that they view life or the way that they're living their lives may not be the one that you want to live.
Yeah. And rightly so, we should all want to live different lives. It's important. So eventually you left work, right?
Hmm.
And it must have been about a 2 year gap, a 2 year period in between you leaving work. You went overseas for a kind of holiday, just to disconnect from everything that came before. You went overseas, you got back to Melbourne, and it was probably a 2 year period before you finally left. In that 2 year period, what was the real kicker where you're just like, fuck it, I'm doing it?
I think you've experienced this, right? Where you go somewhere and you just feel this energy of excitement and curiosity and just this way in which you can be expansive. It's really expansive. And I felt that. I always feel that when I'm traveling and I'm somewhere else. Then the other part of it during this period as well was I was experimenting with life. I was experimenting with the projects that I was working on, the things that I was doing. And so I became much more comfortable and confident in the fact that I can live a lifestyle that isn't structured as it was and still be okay. That it allowed me the freedom to explore and to express And it was okay. Like I didn't have to have that, 9 to 5 job that paid really well, that gave me the opportunities to do this, this, and this, and ticked off these boxes. I could just live how I wanted to live and experience life in a way that made sense to me.
And I think sometimes what's maybe not recognized throughout that process are the sacrifices that people make to get to a certain position. It's easy to see with a business owner who's become a really successful entrepreneur and a millionaire. It's all measurable things, but it's all the things that they did behind the closed doors when there was no limelight on them, when there was no visibility of them. It's all the sacrifices that they made to get there, right? So for you, it sounds like you made so many sacrifices that maybe others out there can relate to. It doesn't just start with the one sacrifice. It's a compounding effect over time. In your time period was a period of 10 years
Yeah.
until that May 2024.
So it was a lot of choices. And in some regards, choices that people sometimes look as selfish. They think it's a choice about you, and it is about you. It's about aligning yourself closer to who you are and what you want. But some of the sacrifices are really simple ones, like not going to certain dinners and not going out with certain people and not attending things because I needed to put the money towards this opportunity, this journey that I was wanting to embark on. It was spending time with myself to make sure that I was even self validating that this is what I really wanted and this is the shape of it and this is how I want it to look and feel, or what I want it to expose me to as well. And so in that period of time, I also, didn't date like you did, right? I didn't date. I kind of just kept to myself and I focused on me because what I really wanted to make sure before I did it was that I was clear about the intention. I was clear about the purpose as to why it was important for me to do this.
Yeah. We will get to the one date that you went on shortly. But I guess, yeah, thank you for sharing, I guess, your experience of it. And if there's, it's going to be a really hard question because there's so many things you would have taken out from that. But for anyone who's listening to this who has maybe considered wanting to try, even if it's just packing your bags up and going traveling, not necessarily working overseas or working remotely, what's one thing that you could say to them?
um, I think for those people is what is that one step, just one step that you can take towards that dream or that vision? And it doesn't have to be a big, bold one. It doesn't have to be leaving a relationship or a job. I kind of take the extreme of things sometimes, but it can just be, sitting with yourself and asking that question, what do I really want? That one single step of just take the noise away, take the distractions away, and just ask yourself that. And
What
then what action can I take?
What do you want in that moment, which over time adds up? Keep
Hmm.
making choices for yourself in that moment, whilst can be seen as selfish. I think people who are experiencing a similar path, but their version, will never view it as selfish. They view it as encouraging and as inspiring.
Hmm. So we've talked about my experience leading up to this point to May 2024. Tell us about yours.
I've always had the bug for travel, always. Thinking back to y- my late teens and my early 20s, at the time where I was playing basketball. I would spend off seasons traveling Europe, moving to different places, and it really started to broaden my perspective and horizons. Um, and I got to travel with basketball a little bit as well, which was really cool. Um, so that's, I think it was an innate thing for me. I already had it in me. I'm a really curious person, and one of the best ways for me to expand my curiosity is by being exposed to different cultures, because you can only take so much from your own culture. Um, and then I guess in my mid 20s, I took the leap of faith and moved from the UK to Australia. I actually came over to Australia to play basketball originally. That planted a love for me for Australia and Melbourne at that point. So I made a decision, I'm going to settle here. I'm going to move over here. Um, but still, the traveling continued for me since living in Melbourne and adjusting to life here and all I loved about it. I still had that desire to want to go travel. And um, it would start with, exploring places in Southeast Asia that maybe I hadn't been before. And I would do it frequently. And every time I got back to my office, sat at my desk after a trip like that, I was like, what am I doing? Why am I in here? I don't want to be in here. But I didn't really know a way out. At that point, the only way out I knew was work and save money, travel, come back, work, save money, travel. But just as holidays to begin with. I then started to get riskier. I was like, I was a contractor. Like, I'm going to leave my contract and go for a prolonged period of time overseas, you know? And then I'm going to come back to Melbourne and I'm going to find a job again. And I'm just going to keep repeating the cycle. And I got to the point where I was like, okay, I don't want to repeat this cycle anymore. I want to actually do it permanently. Or I want the flexibility or at least the opportunity to be wherever I want to be. With having family in the UK, I want to be able to spend more time with them, right? So I needed to start building something that would enable me to live that lifestyle. Um, and I got to the point where I set myself a 2-year plan. This was in 2022. 2022, said to myself, okay, we're going to make this happen. I don't know how it's going to look like, what it's going to be, but we're going to make it happen. So I started making decisions around how can I develop myself outside of my corporate career to give myself an opportunity to bring in income, because obviously you need that to be able to survive. Um, that's where a big part of breath work came into it. I'd already been practicing breath work for about 3 years before, so since 2019, as myself. But I'd never thought about really turning that into something I could coach others in, learning how to breathe. And it's still really underestimated, the power of your breath. But that's for a different episode. So I started putting the wheels in motion for building my breath business. And for a 2-year period, like I made sacrifices everywhere. And there's different reasons for why I made my sacrifices. And I think I'd like to explore that and express that more in a future episode. But just simply speaking, it was not going out anymore. I almost had a year where I just went internal. I went through a relationship breakup actually in 2022, moved in by myself, and I just went pure internal for a year. And it was a really weird time because I felt like, I'm disconnecting from the people around me, even though I already felt disconnected because of everything else. But I was so set on the mission of I'm making this happen. But it was hard, like you said, with sacrifices and perceptions from others, and maybe not always feeling super supported in it. It was hard.
Did you tell people what you were doing, or did you think that they would understand naturally?
I think I believed people would understand naturally. Um, since 2019, my world was a little bit different for me, and it's a really hard thing to express when you're in this kind of survival mode that other people maybe just don't understand because you've never brought them in, you never shared it with them. Um, so I just was internal, but I was internal out of purpose as well because I knew what I wanted to build and I knew what sacrifices that required. S-
I think people often underestimate the sacrifices to make big transitions and changes in life. they think it just happens and they see it when it happens. And I feel like even for us, when we left in May 2024, people just were like, oh, it's happening. And they saw it. But they didn't actually recognize the 2 years before or the 10 years before of working towards this point in time.
Yeah. A lot of my decisions in life for a long time, not even just that 2 years, were about enabling the ability to travel. And that just eventuated into working remotely from wherever I want. Um, I guess we're kind of getting to the point now where this is when our roads start to cross, right? Um, because we'd both been making these decisions. We'd both been in relationships. We'd both been single for a while. And I was like, I think I'd like to at least go on a couple of dates um, before I go on my trip, because I knew the trip was coming and it didn't matter if I met someone or whatever. If they didn't align with it, I was going on my trip. That's another sacrifice. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
I was staying true to what I really believed in. And I went back on the dating apps. I lasted, I think, 3 days. Within those 3 days, I'd picked up a conversation with you. We'd been messaging. You were away for a couple of weeks house sitting.
Hmm.
Um, Something was obviously there, and we arranged to meet up.
Yeah. And it was quite funny because I'm heading into this, and as is Paul, as we now know, we're both heading into this date with this understanding in ourselves that I'm going to head overseas. I had this plan, and for me, my plan was, around about May, I would head off to Vietnam. Initially, actually, my first thought was I'm heading off to Costa Rica, and I don't know where that came from. It might have been through a conversation with a friend, but I was like so determined, and that was where I was heading. And I even actually had dinner with my or lunch with my family, and I said to announce to everybody, I'm going to Costa Rica.
which,
And
which was a very funny moment, right? Because on our date, probably when I was either looking at the table because I was nervous or was eating pizza, whatever it was, you mentioned Costa Rica, and my head lifted up. And I was like, Costa Rica, you say? Because I'd actually been to Costa Rica before. I knew all about it. It's a beautiful country and it's a place I feel very connected with. So that was the first spark, right? The word,
that was kind of the segue into this
yeah.
conversation.
Costa Rica was the spark because it aligned with me because I'd been there and it's something I would go back to. Um, so yeah, so we were at the dinner.
Hmm. I think I'd said something along the lines of, so I'm going to go Costa Rica. And I think you said, hold on a sec. No, I'm going to Costa Rica. And we had this kind of back and forth of like, what do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean? And then that opened the door for us to have a conversation about, well, what does that actually mean? And in the context of, where are you heading? What is that going to look like? And I think it was actually a really nice, natural way for us to just get into the conversation because we'd already been speaking about, society and I guess, our belief that it's structured in a certain way and it suits certain people, but not everybody. And, we've spoken about this before, and even the podcast, we've felt out of place. We felt as though the life that we were living wasn't our own. And then that moment was like, oh, hold on. We're thinking about the same thing. Okay, let's explore that. What does that mean? And that's when you started to talk about your plans for Bali.
Yeah, and I think it's something as well. Very early on, we had strong boundaries around. We were like, "W- I'm still doing this," and you're like, "I'm still doing this." We were like, if it comes together, that's amazing. But right now, it's not about holding each other back. It's about letting each other explore what it is that we want to do. And that was a really kind of solid platform, right? And I'd had the intentions of Bali. You had the intentions of Vietnam. I was kind of, when we first met, I was what, 5, 6 months away from wrapping up work.
Hmm.
Um, I guess facing my own fears there. I had a very comfortable job. I was working in an organization as a delivery lead slash project manager, and I really valued the culture I worked in. I'd not really experienced that in too many cultures before. And it was finally like my life's kind of coming together. It's had so many different railroads. I've been thrown left, right, and center, but I'm finally in a place where actually this I found a business that I enjoy working for, and I'm starting to grow in that business. I'm starting to repair all these different types of things. But I was like, I'm not doing my trip. I'm not going for what I really wanted to do with all my heart. So we'd met, and then a few months later, I kind of handed my notice in, wound that notice up, and set my sights on Bali to begin with.
Yeah. So as we were thinking about, how do our roads kind of connect and weave into each other, we still remained true to what we both wanted individually. But we said if it works, it works. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But we will honor that with each other and respect it as well. But it wasn't going to, the fact that we were both going to different places didn't stop us from pursuing the relationship either. We were like, let's just see what happens and accept the result, whatever that may be. And so we were both kind of on this track of planning. We started to, you left your job. We started to, unwind our individual places where we were, sell things. Like that was kind of a moment of like, oh, this is really happening now.
Packing life up
Yeah.
and realizing that they're just possessions. Do you remember that? Do you know what? If I never have this same paddleboard again, so be it. Do you know what I mean? It's just detaching from the material things for me, which I'd experienced a couple of times already, but it's very almost empowering having that freedom, removing it all, having that freedom, whilst it's scary, whilst there's fear there. It's
Yeah, it was quite a moment for both of us to just go, these things don't actually matter. These things in the scheme of things are just possessions. They're nice to have, but do I really need them with me? And I think when you're looking at your suitcase, because we both have the same suitcase, we're looking at them going, what do I really need? And what do I really need to survive and live and thrive? And if I can fit it all in here, then that's enough. And also, having that moment of pause to go, oh, aren't I grateful for what I have? Aren't I grateful for the opportunity to be able to do this and to set forward in a path and a course that I choose?
you really begin to realize how little you actually need, what's actually important in life. And that was an important takeaway for me. I don't need all this bright stuff. Don't need any of it. I mean, I've never really been like that anyway, but I was like, I don't need any of this. What I need is just a heart led path. I keep talking about my heart led stuff, but what feels really true. And it's easy to stop at any obstacle that comes in your way, to not follow through with something. And I guess that's one thing, I would share is that things won't always go to plan. Even with our trip, it didn't go to plan.
Hmm.
The crash, we covered that in an earlier episode. But would you change it?
No, I wouldn't change it. I I think even though our experience as digital nomads was short, it was
Very short
only
lived.
it was only 4 to 5 months. But that opportunity that we had actually gave us insight into what we really wanted. Because I think before we embarked in it, my idea was I just wanted the freedom to explore and I want the freedom to live how I want to live and be with who I want to be in that moment. And the reality was, it doesn't need to happen or be overseas. It doesn't need to be this permanent on the move thing where we're just constantly in one location to the next location to the next location. And then the other thing that we learnt was community. When you don't have a base and when you don't have a place that you can come back to, then you really struggle to build community because not only are you transient, but so are the people around you as well.
Yeah. I remember, like, at some point, there's like, just referencing what you were saying. When you wake up each morning and you scan what's around you, is that there purposely? Have you created that? That's something that's aligned to you, or is it not? And I think that's a really kind of, it's not an easy way to look at it, but that is, I think how we learn to shape our lives together. And it's always a good thing to consider. I think curiosity, for me anyway, curiosity about that question, why is this here? Why is it not here? That types of stuff really gives you the opportunity to build something that's true.
Mm. So, from a quick little summary, we head off. You go to Bali, I go to Vietnam. We then meet in Vietnam. We then travel to Thailand. We're about to set up our lives, and then we have an accident. And that kind of boxes in our digital nomad experience into a very short time frame. But through that experience, what did you learn about, I guess, the expectation you had going into it versus what you actually got out of it?
I felt it was going to be easy. I thought all the transitions would be really easy. Um, I think in the past, in my personal life, I've made a lot of decisions that I just make them because they feel right, and then you learn if they're right or not. Um, so I thought it would be really easy. I thought we'd be able to find community quite easily, and that was one of my highest values for the trip, was to find community, to find people where you can really just sit and be and feel like you're in place. Um, but it's not that easy. It's not that easy just to rock up to another country and really really enable that happening. And what I discovered about myself, I actually wasn't in a place where I was ready for the community. There was more to stuff to do. So my lesson is, for anyone who's listening, you can just jump into things and not think about it and get it done. And, a lot of the times it might work out, but I think it's good to have a plan for if it doesn't work out. And I didn't have a plan initially.
Yeah, the planning bit is really important, especially if you are trying to grow your business along the way. I think my lesson was, so I've been running my brand and marketing consultancy for about over a year by then. And I had a few clients in the books and I was working with them. But what I didn't realize would be my challenge was, maintaining that business development on the road and building that pipeline of clients while we were moving quite a bit because we weren't fixed in one place for a long period of time. The maximum was a month. And just trying to keep that momentum going, you do recognize, and we'll go back to community, is that sometimes face to face is really important, especially in our kind of business as well, and especially my one that I was building. I get a lot of my work through referral. My work is through, knowing people, talking to people, spending time with people. And it wasn't because I was emailing, cold emailing, or calling. It was the fact that I would go, "You have a question about marketing? Sure, let's have a coffee." And I couldn't do that when we were traveling.
Yeah. And when you move anywhere, it takes a good 6+ months to really get set up. And I didn't think it would be like that being in, a Southeast Asian country or something. I thought it would be much more seamless.
Yeah,
Um,
because we went to locations that we thought a community would already exist. And we could just slip into that community and get to know people and be part of it. And it's actually more difficult than we anticipated. Probably naively, we anticipated, oh, we just go somewhere, we meet people, and then off you go.
yeah. I think something else that came up is the having somewhere to ground, that is around community, that is around whatever someone's version of comfort is. I think that's very important, especially when trying to build a business. Because it's not this, if you're overseas trying to build a business, it's not the same as just going traveling for 3 weeks. You don't experience the countries in the same way. It's very different. Like, you are looking for how you establish yourself here as a person, as a relationship, as a business, whatever it is. And that comes with its challenges and so many unknowns anyway.
Yeah, I think the other thing, anyone who's considering becoming a digital nomad is you're not just going to this location for a holiday, you're actually bringing your whole life with you when you journey there. So, you're used to going to a cafe or a restaurant or hanging on the beach and going to the beach club and doing all these things. No, when you're there, your whole life is going to be split into, the joy of being somewhere, but also your work and your business and trying to develop it and grow it and then meet people. So there's all these factors that you have to take into account when you go somewhere because it's not just a holiday where you can go in, you get out, and off you go. This is you're trying to create a place where you can settle, where you can create a base, where you can build a community or be part of a community. And it takes effort. All of that really takes a lot of effort. And you have to be able to switch away from this is fun time.
And it's an adjustment to a different culture as well. It's going into another culture and learning what respect is in that culture. Like there's nothing hidden here. Like what's happening in Bali is insane. Like we've gone over there and we've taken away from the culture. It's in certain hotspots of Bali, and that's a like when you go somewhere to really think about, well, what is their culture? Where do they feel disrespected? Actually, how do they feel disrespected? Now you got to kind of put yourself out there with locals and have language barriers to understand that. And some of the places we stayed in more local places as opposed to the touristy areas, right? And that
Mhm.
was a big adjustment in itself. Even the energy feels very different.
Yeah. And it's important, I believe, anyway, that when you go and embark on this, and you step into somebody else's country and their culture to really respect it, to understand what it means to be there and to be grateful for that land and to not just go there and go, I want to bring my Western views and my Western values and my Western things over here because it's a cheaper place to live. It's accessible for me because I can't afford it in my own country. And then perpetuate this idea of modern colonialism, which was a really important thing for us. And I struggled with that actually. Like I honestly struggled with, how are we participating and how are we contributing to this happening in this country, wherever we were, because we would go to the cafes with more tourists or Western or digital nomads. And even like when we were in Thailand, one of my friends who we caught up with, he was like, oh, term digital nomad gives me the ick. I don't like that. And we asked him why, and he goes, well, it's just these people who fly in, who come in here, who do their things and sell their wares, but they don't actually respect where they are. They don't care about, the life that they are trying to build here or the people who actually live here locally. They just fly in and they expect the things that they're used to and expect the locals to change for them and to make it work for them.
And I think it's vital that in a new culture, you really got to try and respect that in the ways you know how, in the ways you can relate to. I can't relate to Vietnam in the way that you can. That's that's technically your home, right? I can't relate to it in the same way you can, but I can explore a way. I can find a way. I can relate to you and try and support you in that.
And you can find a way of just finding respect, the real simple courtesy of acknowledging the fact that you're in somebody else's land and you are there, and that there is a language that they speak, there is a way in which they behave, there is a way in which they engage with each other. And it's just learning those nuances. It's not about having to enmesh yourself in that society completely and learn the language in its entirety. I don't speak Vietnamese very well at all. I can get around, but it's just understanding that, oh, is this something that I can learn? A gesture, a word that I can make that other person who's there feel more like I'm trying, I'm making an effort, and I respect who you are, and I respect your place here and your country.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's even something as wearing a helmet, driving the speed limit, knowing how in hospitality culture is different in different countries. Like in Bali, for example, there are different people who are employed for different responsibilities. Um, so if you try to take your plate somewhere, they almost find that kind of offensive because you're taking away from what they're here to do. So it's learning those little tiny things, right? Little things that sometimes you don't think about, but you've got to try and explore it to understand it.
Yeah, and I think if you don't know, ask. There is less offense given when you actually ask than it is to assume. As we wrap up this episode, what is, I guess, what's your view on digital nomad life now? And would you do it again?
Yes.
Expand on that, please.
Location independent lifestyle. Um, I would do it again. I'd do it in a very different way. Like I would certainly recommend it to anyone who's ever had even just the smallest spark of curiosity. There's so much fear and it's so hard to leave things that we're comfortable with, but I would recommend giving it a shot. And that in itself is the reason why I would do it again. Maybe in South America, maybe somewhere else,
Costa Rica.
Costa Rica, because I want to give it a shot, you know? And it might, somewhere different might work exactly right, or it might not. But at least I've tried, at least I've figured it out. What about you?
I would definitely do it again. I would say I would come into it more prepared, as the things that we've talked about, understanding the difference between holidaying and being there. I would be more prepared in terms of I guess, the difficulty and challenge of building community. So I think anyone who is thinking about it, just think about those considerations. Are they of value to you? Is it important to you? Do you feel that you can, find your way into those things that you really value? And if you can, then absolutely give it a go. I think you don't know what you don't know. So unless you do it, you'll start to recognize, oh, that happened or that didn't happen or that's what I got. Oh, actually, this is a thing that I didn't expect to happen to me, but wow, that's amazing. So I think go through the experience. I mean, I like to think, life is an experiment and we should keep experimenting. And if this is important for you to test and learn and to understand, then go for it.
Thanks for listening to Out of Place. If something in today's episode resonated with you, let us know or share with someone who might need to hear it.
Or leave us a review because it matters more than you know. And if you're looking to connect with us, we are on Instagram at Out of Plaece, spelled Plaece.
We're so grateful to be building this alongside you. If you have any experiences of digital nomad, location independent lifestyle, however you define it, please feel free to share with us, connect with us with it through our Instagram. And here's to finding your way, even when it feels a little bit out of place. We'll see you in the next episode.